Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmach Live, and my name is Chandrakant. Today, we want to discuss something very specific, which is related to our world today, and how do we build relationship in the world of digital communication. That is the point of discussion for today, and we have a very special guest to discuss on this subject. Before we start our discussion, I must tell you that there is a free giveaway. Please stick around in this discussion, and we will tell you in the end how you can claim your free gift. Welcome back, friends. And today we will be discussing about how to build a relationship in the digital age. And for this discussion, we have a very special guest. His name is Mr. Mike Bradley. He is the Group CSO of RHF and Scale Up Arena, joining us from UK. So, without further ado, let me invite Mike to the discussion.
Good afternoon, Chandra. Good afternoon. Good to be with you again. I trust you've had a good day.
Yes, great to see you, Mike. And as you know, that we are passing through a very severe time, and as per the new norms, the India is actually growing faster. But with all this growth, there is a negative GDP of almost 7% this year. So I think we are
Hmm.
struggling as a country. I think a lot of other countries are also struggling. So
Yep.
I think it's very important to build a digital relationship to continue survivability of business. So I think your opinion on this subject is very vital.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think, here we are as a testament to the new style of digital communication, Chandra, because over the course of the recent months, we've developed an ongoing connection and relationship without actually, unfortunately, having been able to share a mango lassi and a curry together in Delhi or in London or the south coast of England. So I think this demonstrates that actually you can build connections on a global level with people that you've not met before. And although in time past it would have been nice to have met face to face and develop the relationship and start the relationship that way, we're now in a new era where that isn't necessarily always the case. And what a good job it is, because otherwise I think the world would have collapsed economically probably, 15 months ago?
Well, I think there are some industries which are very badly hit, especially in the manufacturing side, on the
Mm.
hospitality, and also the transportation, travel and tourism. They are very badly hit. So I think these guys have to reinvent new ways of generating revenue, which is
Yes.
also happening because human ingenuity is also working. But I think what more
Mm-hmm.
can be done is something that we would like to hear from you, and also based on your global interaction, what are the best practices that people can follow in order to build digital relationships?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think is very important, and I've worked with digital comms for many years. I was, 15 years ago, I was helping to sell out this newfangled audio and web conferencing opportunity, and at the time, people were actually scared of digital, and in some industries, that was happening 18 months ago. Of course, being from a tech background, it's something I adopted, and I first was involved with online communications back in 1998 with video conferencing. Things have come on a long way since that. We're now all able and easily able to interact with each other on a digital mechanism, see each other without the old video conferencing. Phased speaking and jumbled words, etc. Our biggest challenges these days are probably the cables in the ground, which are still sort of running at 1990 bandwidth. Haven't quite kept up with multimedia. However, I think the essential part of any sort of communication is the interpersonal aspect. So I think the first rule of, if you like, digital communication is be yourself, relax, and be yourself, because ultimately people are trying to make an assessment of you, and originally that would have been, how weak is your handshake, or do they interact with me, do they look at me when they're talking, do they look out like this. Those same aspects apply online, and whatever made you trustworthy, convincing, credible in an offline basis also has to now be conveyed, but in a digital way. And for a lot of us, that's a new thing, okay? But it's still all about, what is it about you? What's your personal branding? I happen to have a terrible sense of humor, being English. So, humor is part of it for me. The ability to smile, the ability to be interested in the other person. These are all offline and online skills. Just because you're online doesn't mean you have to sit there like you're a television presenter or presenting the news. It's all about creating the animation, creating the rapport, the empathy, just as you would in a face-to-face meeting.
Well, I think it's a very important sermon that you have given. I'm using this as a sermon because it's literally a sermon, simply because I think there is a new skill requirement right now for everyone. You can be very senior in the industry, but if you don't have digital skills, you will not be able to build a relationship. So I would like you to also tell our viewers, what are these special skills required now in order to build relationships?
Well, I think one of them is definitely empathy. Any relationship, you need to build empathy, and maybe some of us, and I think the mechanism for that is changing. In our generation, should I say, Chandra, we were brought up to play and to interact in the physical realm. Possibly the millennials of the world, and this is very controversial, I'm sure you'll get inundated with complaints, but millennials weren't brought up to interact in the same way we did. That their interaction was done on one of these sort of like, you can't see it, but with one of these mobiles, mobiles and online. You interact with people you've never met. And in a sense, maybe that's a bit of an advantage because they're used to this sort of environment. And maybe it's our generation that struggled to adopt this new technology more than others. But there's still the same skill of trying to actually interact and build positive rapport with people. And I think it's very much, again, so the first thing is empathy. The important thing to build empathy is you need to have a positive communication. If you actually end up being negative, non-supportive, derogatory, dare I say, rude, disrespectful, those things do not build any sort of rapport, whether online or offline. So it's got to be about positive. I'm very much a believer in the fact that, if you want to get positive environment going, you've got to create that environment, whether that be an online environment or in a meeting room or in a coffee shop. You've got to create positivity. If you're, unless of course you're in a debate, and in a debate, maybe you're, like I did, make my statement about millennials. But I did also say they might have an advantage. Within a debate, I think you've got to be able to make a statement that generates thought, challenges current thinking, groupthink. And of course, in this day and age, you've also got to be very careful in that, because there's a chance that you could be labeled incorrectly based on something taken out of context. One of my old school friends made a had gone on a walk on our local, a bit further along the coast than this, and found a really nice location. And he put a picture on Facebook and made a statement like, "This is a great place to come, secret place. There's not many people here, etc." I replied and said, "Yeah, that looks great. Where is it?" So what did he say? He used the colloquial term, "Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you." Now, when he said that, we know that's just a term that people use. Say, "Oh, if I tell you the secret, I'd have to kill you." That's just a friendly sort of thing. But of course, Facebook called that out and actually stopped him for 24 hours posting things on Facebook. But actually, it wasn't meant as "I'm going to kill you." It's a metaphor for, the type of approach. It was just a sense of humor thing. Again, maybe it's the English sense of humor, but those sort of things, obviously, you've got to be careful of in the digital world. Things can be recorded, repeated. I think there was even a cricketer, in India, you love your cricket. There was an English cricketer who did a very good batting job against New Zealand. I think it was at Lord's yesterday. And apparently, years ago, he tweeted something and he was actually having to call it out and apologize 8 years later for something he said in his early teens at the tweet. So, the impact of digital communication is phenomenal. The reach is phenomenal. The potential is phenomenal. But the potential is phenomenal from a good and a bad side. So I think it's always got to be empathetic. It's always got to be positive. But you've got to be very aware that what you're trying to do and what you're going to say is a bit like putting on the front page of the India Times. Once it's there forever. And unfortunately, people don't always want to look at things from a positive light. So we've got to be, and I think we venture into a very serious area if we start to say, "Oh, this particular regular phrase can be misinterpreted and taken literally," because if you say the wrong word, you can get lambasted for it, even if it's quoted out of context. So I think we've got to be very careful to guard our freedoms, but use it wisely. Do you agree?
Yes, I fully agree with you. In fact, the digital skill is a completely new skill, and many people don't have it. They sometimes overdo it or sometimes underdo it. They don't. There is no balance in the communication. And you made a
No.
very important point. Whatever you say. In fact, there is a saying in India that if the conversation gets out of your mouth, it's not going to come back. So,
Mm.
and it is very true, especially in the digital space, because everything is recorded. And
Mm.
you also mentioned about Facebook. I think Facebook also take these things very, very seriously. And the simple things can make or break your account on the digital space, because if somebody
Mm.
reports that this person is spreading lies or rumors or doesn't know how to talk, or not positive, the Facebook can take action on it.
Absolutely, and it's not like a courtroom where a jury of 12 people look at it, say, "Well, actually, he was only joking." The platform or the censoring agent will take that decision, and there's a potentially very massive impact. I think maybe in the future there's going to have to be a freedom of expression online law, which basically says, look, you cannot take everything literally. You've got to understand the context. You've got to understand the person. My friend is not the sort of person that goes out killing people. So, he's normally surfing or skateboarding or building houses or whatever. So he's not the sort of person that is going to be actually trying to kill someone. And that needs to be reflected in the way his posts are going to be censored. And I mean, there are obviously people who do have a negative persona ongoing, do have bad objectives, and we've got to be very careful when we start censoring. Freedom of the press. There's freedom of expression for individuals, but so long as it doesn't incite violence, and it's not in the context of that person's usual persona, then I think it's got to be proportionately reviewed.
Well, Mike, there are a lot of legal implications as you are trying to tell our viewers, and also there are guidelines and there are regulations. And from 1st of June in India, there is very similar guidelines, similar to GDPR, are now active. So, do you think there is a global language protocol that needs to be learned by people who are using digital space?
I think it depends. And there's always going to be a percentage of people that don't want to learn it. That, like, there's a percentage of people who don't want to get vaccinated. There'll be a percentage of people who have a principal objection to being told how to behave. And I suppose in a way I'm a bit that way. But I think it again comes back to, how do you build connections and communication online? It's got to be empathetic. It's got to be positive. It's also got to be prudent. And also, I think it's got to be diplomatic. At the end of the day, if your objective is to be positive, if you don't phrase it in a diplomatic way, you're going to lose a lot of people. So I think you've always got to be trying to ensure that people don't misinterpret, and they certainly don't misinterpret in the context of what's being said. Because at least then, if you wade into, I mean, there's another person on my Facebook, and they are always posting something up, which I think, if I was dotting the I's and crossing the T's, I'd probably report it and say, actually, I don't think this is constructive or helpful for world peace. But I don't make a comment about it. I just choose to ignore it. Yeah. But it's something where, in fact, it should probably have been sanctioned by Facebook more than my friend's colloquial phraseology when I asked him where it was. And he said, "Oh, I don't want to tell you." Because everybody else will go there and it won't be quiet anymore. So I think each individual has to make a decision as to what is empathetic, what is positive, what is actually going to enable us to build connections and communication in a positive way. And to do that, you've got to always have in mind, again, if this was on the front page of the India Times or the BBC News, would I actually want this to be published? And if the answer to that is no, then don't say it, because it's, the sad thing is, and for me, there are some really serious subjects of debate that need to be openly discussed, but they're not debated and they're not raised because there's this rather unfortunate labeling which occurs, which if you say something, there'll be one person who comes along and says, he's anti-X or she's anti-this because they said that. And that's probably not the case at all. But if you took that one phrase on its own, you would say, oh, that's the wrong thing to say. They should be censured. They should have their account stopped. They should do this. They should do that. So I think there's very much got to be a realization of that. And again, on video conferences, if there's a topic thrown out for discussion, you always have to ensure, particularly if it's a bigger group, you always have to ensure that you're being sensible and positive and diplomatic about the way you handle it. I mean, we've had calls where there's quite a few people on, and the idea is, I think, to keep the positive flowing, keep the empathy building, let people see the true you, but in a positive light, because that's how you build relationships. And I think that's really great in this day and age that we are, several thousand miles, kilometers apart, building rapport, building relationships, able to trade, help each other sell, support each other, because actually it's a tough world out there and we need to work together. And the only way to work together in this day and age is with effective digital communications.
I think communication is very, very important to build any relationship, and positive communication is absolutely important. But in the olden days, like 1 year away, where people used to say that you have to look presentable when you go for meetings, you have to be suited, booted, and all that. All that is changing now, but I think new norms are coming. And to look presentable on this 2D screen, it's a very tough job. You have to read the expression of the other person, and it creates another technical scenario where you have to have the right amount of lights, camera, and action. So, do you think that's a skill that needs to be learned in addition to better communication?
I think so. I think, to be honest, though, that's an area where the tools themselves actually could do more. And I think in the future, for example, we look at the screen now, there are ways that the technology could improve the saturation and the picture quality, and using, technology to make sure that the best possible presentation is available. As we know, we can put a backdrop on, and sometimes when you've got hair like mine, it sort of looks like it's floating in the air somewhere. But that stuff can all be a bit like with headsets, where you can have noise cancellation. I think you can also have refinement of the picture and the broadcast quality of what is being shown here. And I think that's where improvements will come in the future. Funny enough, I saw one of these polls on LinkedIn the other day saying, is post-pandemic, what's going to happen to usage on Zoom? Is it going to disappear? Is it going to keep going up? Is it going to be, I think the word was hybrid, but declining slightly, it was hybrid and increasing. I actually think that there'll be a bit of a dip in usage, because what will happen is people, after 15 months of not being able to face-to-face, can go, oh, thank goodness I can go meet Chandra and have a curry and a mango lassi. And so we'll do that. And then we'll say, well, actually, it was really great, but much as we like each other, we don't need to meet every week. So we'll meet face-to-face. We'll have, I don't know, a meal, a coffee, a meeting when's convenient. And after that, it will be, we'll continue doing our digital communication the majority of the time. And then in 4 months' time, when I next come to Delhi, we meet each other and we have another chat. So I think there's going to be this new world of hybrid, which is going to be a mix of mainly online and occasional offline. Particularly as, and I've been talking to other contacts of mine, and they've been saying, I don't want to go back to chasing around the world or chasing around the country trying to talk to people face to face. I've been able to manage my communications quite happily online. I don't want to be traveling all the time now. And the only winners of traveling, of course, are the transport companies, the trains. And in the case of the UK, dare I again controversially say it, people like the RMT, who can insist on having strikes and upsetting everybody's commuting schedule, they're the ones who've lost their power. It has been a long time since the RMT has had a strike. Thank you very much. Long may that continue, because travel was taking an awful lot of everybody's time, money, inconvenience, quality of life. The place you had to live had to be near enough to the city or to the office to be able to get there every day. What a waste of time that was. And I think now we've got more. Most of us have got more cash in our pockets because we're not spending thousands a year on travel. We've got more time to enjoy that money that we do work for. We've got more time to spend it on goods and services, which might also help recover the GDP negatives. Because actually what we don't want to be doing is spending all our money pouring it into the train companies. We'd be far better spending that on SME products and services. Buy local. Buy from your friendly SME, whether they be national or international.
Well, absolutely. And the digital presence actually breaks the boundary and makes more lasting relationships. And that brings me to the third point of any communication which is digital, I think, is a story which takes you along. So, is there a skill required to build the right synopsis, right type of story where you want to communicate with people so that people listen to you? Is it important in digital world or not? What is your opinion?
Well, I think a story is always important. Simplicity is the key. Complexity is confusing. But people relate to a story. If you can take them on the journey from start to finish, then you're probably more likely to have them with you at the end of it. That doesn't mean it's got to be 20 minutes long. It means it's got to be succinct. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be endorsable or endorsed, supported. And then I think there's a very good, well, it's always a good way to convey a message, always has been, whether it be to a room full of delegates or whether it be to a virtual meeting full of delegates. The ability to convey a message short and succinct. I'm infamous for my alliteration. I didn't use it today, but I now start to come out with alliterative groups of phrases and words, which I use them because it helps, well, apart from anything else, helps me to remember the story. But also I think it helps other people sometimes to pick up a story. If they can just remember 3 words of the same letter, they might just, catch on to that.
Well, Mike, there is one more very important aspect of digital communication, and that is the sort of related to the mental health issues. So that particular subject is a very large subject, and we are not discussing that today. But I think whatever you have covered today with regard to these 3 points, which are the basics of communication in the digital space, is like maintain your language in a proper way, which is global in nature, and you don't use any colloquial, proverbs which people don't understand, and keep it simple, make a nice story, and also get technical knowledge in terms of controlling your camera lights so that you look presentable. So thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your thoughts on this very, very important, very, very hot subject in today's world.
Been a pleasure, Chandra, as always.
Thank you, Mike, and we will catch up next week as usual and probably discuss something more interesting.
Okay, look forward to it.
We have some unique Akulmach memorabilia which will make you look outstanding. The graphics on these corporate gifts are based on the global best business practices. To become recipient of one of these gifts for free, you have to watch this video till the end and provide your valuable comments. Or you can also share your experiences. The person who makes the best comment would be chosen to become a recipient of these beautiful Akulmach gift, absolutely free, delivered to your doorsteps. The winner would also get a chance to be invited live as a distinguished panelist during our next video. What are you waiting for, friends? Please subscribe Akulmach and smash that like button.